Please join me in welcoming Jake.
Okay. On the night of July 31st, 2013, the improvisational rock band Fish played a version of their song Tweezer in Lake Tahoe, Nevada that lasted about 37 minutes. Its mammoth length was due to the fact that it moved seamlessly through over half a dozen discrete improvisational episodes that varied in harmony, dynamics, melody, and groove. Fans instantly heralded the jam as one of the most adventurous and exciting of the band's career. Like many fans of the band, I was at home listening to the live streaming audio of the concert and simultaneously conversing in disbelief with other fans on Twitter about this jam. Within minutes of the jam ending, Hartford Courant music journalist Michael Hamad tweeted this picture from his personal account. Many fans expressed amazement and enthusiasm for Hamad's drawing. A frequent theme in the public reactions to Hamad was a lack of understanding of music theory that would clarify exactly what he represented in his diagram. And an equally prominent response was, "Do you have any more of these?" often from the same commenters. My paper today explores this very paradox, that many Fish fans admit to loving Hamad's maps while having no understanding of their music theory content. Fish fans privilege improvisation that moves through a variety of melodic, harmonic, and rhythmic areas as the highest form of the band's musical expression. Hamad has created an analytic notation that fosters an affective connection between Fish fans and the maps, revealing how fans' listening practices are acutely conditioned to recognize journeys through harmonic space. The cartographic nature of the diagrams intuitively resonates with Fish fans, since Hamad's work represents a notion of musical journeying that is fundamental to the Fish experience. So a little bit of background, just to get you oriented. Formed in 1983, Fish consists of Trey Anastasio on guitar, Mike Gordon on bass, Paige McConnell on keyboards, and band namesake John Fishman on drums. Fish built their reputation as a band always willing to take chances, to be weird, and to never play the same show twice, and they did this through varying the set list every night and by improvising. Fish was certainly influenced by the Grateful Dead, although this comparison has long been overemphasized, in part due to the non-musical similarities between the band's fan bases. Significantly, Fish was also influenced by an improvisational style that avoids the model of a soloist improvising over changes, and this style was popularized by jazz rock fusion bands from the 1970s, including Herbie Hancock's Mwandishi Group and Pat Metheny. Still, one musical aspect Fish does share with the Grateful Dead is the latter's approach to a group style of improvisation, in which each band member listening to one another is more important than the virtuosity of any individual player. Author Walter Holland refers to Fish jams as, quote, improvised arrangement rather than a solo. And drummer John Fishman has even admitted that when Anastasio or McConnell take a solo, quote, there's always a conversation going on underneath whoever's soloing, end quote. The members of Fish say that their improvisational approach often involves listening to a different member of the band and reacting to what they're playing, either through imitation, counterpoint, or complementation. And it's this democratic approach that allows the band to move relatively freely between keys, moods, and grooves within a single jam. And the Tahoe Tweezer exemplified this idea of a series of episodic jam segments, or of stable improvisational areas smoothly connected by moments of instability. Now, Mike Hamad's Fish fandom began in high school in 1990, but his interest waned after 1994. He completed his PhD in musicology from Brandeis in 2005 with a dissertation titled True Interpreters of Words, Tonal Distances in Franz Liszt's Early Songs. My response to that was, I didn't know Franz Liszt wrote songs. Hamad left academia and is now the staff music writer for the Hartford Courant, covering mainly popular music and jazz. When Hamad reintroduced the band's music into his life in 2010, he felt the feeling he'd forgot and realized that much of the listening for tonal relationships that he had cultivated while analyzing Liszt songs applied to the large-scale tonal relationships in Fish jams. Hamad had already devised a simple system of representing tonal distance using boxes and arrows for his dissertation, such as this diagram for an early version of Liszt's well-known lead, Die Lorelei. Hamad began notating these kinds of movements between keys in Fish's music mainly as a way to help him make sense of what the band was doing during lengthy improvisations. He noted how the timing of his Tahoe Tweezer roadmap tweet, right after the jam had ended and fans were all online enthusing about it, helped his map go viral throughout the Fish community, saying that, quote, "Everyone on Twitter at that moment sharing it just sent it out there, spinning endlessly," end quote. Within a few days, encouraged by the initial positive response, Hamad began sharing maps of older, well-known jams, starting a new Twitter account called @FishMaps, which has amassed over 3,600 followers to date, and established a Tumblr, which he called Setlist Schematics. Responses such as these were common throughout social media. However, those outside the Fish community also began to take an interest in the maps, and features in the McSweeney's publication Believer Mag and the Village Voice followed in the ensuing year. In part, this was because Fish maps are artistically intriguing. As Hamad rhetorically asked in his Believer article, quote, "If you make music theory something fascinating to look at, will more people become interested in learning about it? I hope so," end quote. Hamad attracted his largest audience yet with a video spot on the New York Times Artsbeat blog with text and narration by pop music critic Ben Ratliff, and he's also featured in the latest edition of the Norton Reader alongside such authors as Barack Obama and Frederick Douglass. It was in this video that Hamad articulated the paradox that fans requested to see certain favorite jams in diagram form, which, quote, "blew his mind because they also suggested that they had no idea what these things meant," end quote. So it'll be helpful at this point to go through part of a map along with the music in order to highlight some of the features of the maps. After his initial Tahoe Tweezer map, Hamad began to streamline his diagrams, both cleaning up the organization as well as adding more detail and coming up with a series of standardized terms that he frequently uses. These terms are all now listed on a legend on his website. And you have this map on the back of your handout. I made 35, but I think there's more people than that here, so I apologize. If you don't have one, you can share. This map is a 23-minute version of Tweezer from October 20th, 2013 at the Hampton Coliseum in Hampton, Virginia. Because the excerpts I will play are out of context of the entire jam, I hope that what I'm trying to explicate is still clear. However, I invite you all to listen to this jam on your own with the maps, and I've provided some links on the handout that you can do that for as well. So the first 4.5 minutes of Tweezer are relatively invariant between versions. It's a very simple, funky blues song in A minor with a pentatonic melodic quality. But to get the sound world of Tweezer into our heads, I'll play just a few seconds from the opening composed section of the song. And the composed section is all of this right here. And I'm just going to play a couple seconds of this. That's basically it, just that riff over and over and over again. Now for fans, the song part of Tweezer is merely a warm-up for the real meat of the performance, which is the open-ended jam that begins around 4 minutes and 42 seconds of this version, and which Hamad indicates as jam in brackets, separating it out as a separate entity from the earlier song. I've just blown it up here for you a little bit. So in the opening stages of this jam, McConnell, the keyboardist, plays a 4 chord every fourth measure, which Hamad notates using Roman numerals here. And bassist Mike Gordon establishes a bass motif, and McConnell switches to the electric Fender Rhodes piano halfway through. Hamad also represents the muted guitar strumming that you'll hear on the opening 2/8 notes of each bar with these little peaks that he has here. So I'll play you just a little bit of what's represented in this segment. Now moving ahead, soon the dynamics begin to build in the drums. and drummer John Fishman plays more loosely with his cymbals. McConnell has moved back to the grand piano, which you can see right there, and he and Anastasio exchange some imitative playing. The band as a whole briefly tonicizes the subdominant D major on a downbeat, but this doesn't stick, and both Anastasio and Gordon resolve back to A minor. Hamad indicates this with the bracketed D rather than a fully enclosed D to imply a tonicization rather than a complete modulation. And after returning to A minor, Anastasio begins to create a tremolo effect with his wah pedal, which initiates a dynamic dip and a dissolve into a more ambient texture. Hamad uses this double arrow right here to indicate that this is a significant shift in mood, and then indicates that a pulse is still clearly present, along with guitar effects and distortion in McConnell's clavinet. So I'm going to try and sort of do a bouncing ball thing here while we're listening. Now, at this point in the jam, we come to the first significant modulation. Bassist Mike Gordon begins to play a two-note ostinato on C, and then using his lowest B string, moves up to E through D. McConnell immediately begins to play a cadential figure in E minor, and Fishman builds the dynamics with a funk groove. I'm going to skip this particular example to get to the next one here. Fishman eventually switches over to a more rock-styled beat, which we see here, while McConnell is using the wah effect on his clavinet keyboard, and Anastasio finds a repeating motive of flat 7, 6, 5 in E. So that is D, C sharp, B, because he's thinking in E major still, or E mixolydian sort of. The presence of C sharp as scale to degree 6 here gives the jam a Dorian flavor and facilitates the establishing of a 1-4 jam that echoes the earlier 1-4 jam from the A minor section. So I'll play this one as well. Now, Phish fans have taught themselves how to listen to the band's music with an ear for large-scale formal relationships. One indication of this is that fans actually devised a language to describe formal departures within jams. A fan named John Flynn wrote the following in an online posting to the Usenet group, rec.music.phish. If you don't know what Usenet's groups are, they're basically like email lists or chat rooms before those things really sort of existed. And he said this in January 1997, quote, "I think Phish jamming falls into two types of jamming. One, jamming that is based around a fixed chord progression. Two, jamming that improvises chord progressions, rhythms, and the whole structure of the music," end quote. Now, fans soon adopted this language and began to refer to song versions and their jams as either Type 1 or Type 2. Type 2 jamming is, for many fans, the highest expression of Phish's music. The very fact that this language has become a common part of the discourse amongst fans illustrates the centrality of musical exploration to the Phish fan experience. Although they may not be familiar with the specific harmonic operations at play within a jam, fans are quick to notice when a song's known chord progressions, rhythms, and structure falls apart and becomes malleable through improvisation. In fact, these moments are often cheered at concerts. Thus, the very notion of musical exploration, of departure from a known space into unknown musical space, is central to Phish's jamming and to the fans' experience thereof. The drummer John Fishman acknowledges this when he said, quote, "Our music invents a geography. It draws a big map," end quote. And he elaborates that the composed section of every song is the land, where they, quote, "build the boat," end quote. Then they, quote, "get into the water with the jam," and "we're like Columbus," end quote. Clearly, exploration is a central component to their idiom. Returning then to the central question at hand, why are so many fans enthralled by technical diagrams that they don't understand? I contend that Hamad's Phish maps foster an affective bond between the fan base and the diagrams, in part because of the unique ways that Phish fans construct scene identity. Elizabeth Yeager has theorized that the identity of the Phish scene is a, quote, "spatial articulation of affective authenticity," end quote, which is, quote, "produced and formed by scene members themselves," end quote. In other words, the emplaced experience of the concert becomes the locus for scene identity. The Phish concert is where all social interaction, ritualized activities, and musical materiality intersect. But this does not, however, mean that scene identity is closed off from those not present at the concert. Streaming audio, or what Phish fans call couch tour, has obviated the need for physical presence at a show in order to participate in the various experiences that were previously emplaced within the concert space. The ability to discuss the music in real time through social media further facilitates the production and articulation of scene identity. And the virtual space opened up by social media, such as Twitter, in fact becomes an extension of the physical space of the concert. Another aspect that deepens the connection between scene identity, fans, and the maps is that Hamad uses terms culled from the vernacular language particular to Phish fans. Fans engage regularly in what scholar Natalie Dollar calls, quote, "communicative cultural forms," end quote, in which members both implicitly and explicitly display their shared identity. In other words, fans use language to demarcate and assert their belonging to the scene. Hamad incorporates the language that fans already use to describe musical elements. In the tweezer map from before, the jam section that he calls bliss, which you see right here, comes from the term bliss jam that many fans use to describe a major mode jam that follows a minor mode segment, or to describe a soaring peak of dynamics, melody, and color. In other maps, such as this one of the song Tube from Dayton, Ohio in 1997, aphoristic song lyrics are incorporated into the maps as well. The phrase "so stupendous," which you see at the top there, is instantly recognizable as part of the song Tube to most Phish fans. Now finally, there's a purely aesthetic connection between many fans and the Phish maps. Simply put, Hamad's work has transcended music theory and entered into the world of artwork. While his earliest maps had a certain beauty in their geometry and clean lines, Hamad gradually started to introduce a variety of other visual components to the maps. Color became an important variable in both the text and the lines, and also in the backgrounds of the maps. Some of Hamad's more recent maps, such as this one, are highly calculated works that aim for a specific kind of shape and representation of musical space. And you can see that even the key letters have become part of the shapes. An A there, a G here, and these are C's. In some cases, the visual component of the map becomes another tool in strengthening the affective bond to fans because Hamad manages to capture how fans feel about a particular jam with his visuals. During a version of the song Ghost from New Year's Eve 2010, Phish built a very calculated major key jam, atypical for this song, from a low dynamic to an exultant peak, increasing linearly in range, dynamic, and rhythmic activity until its ecstatic release. Many fans found a high level of spirituality in this shared ecstatic peak and took to calling this jam the Holy Ghost. Because the song is called Ghost. Hamad's choice to represent the entire map as, in his words, quote, "a giant flaming arrow," end quote, encapsulates the 0 to 60 single-minded trajectory of this particular jam, but also captures the exuberance that fans feel for this jam. Hamad said that he was, quote, completely surprised by some of the shapes that emerged, unquote, because he never realized that the process of drawing fish maps would ever yield results that represent the music visually, nor did he expect that his graphical impression would resonate visually with fans. Now, Hamad expressed to me that it was always his goal to have people follow along with the maps while listening, and in doing so perhaps raise the musical understanding of fans. Yet since so many fans tell him that they don't understand the content of his maps, he feels as though he was unsuccessful in that endeavor. I argued back to him that I believed he had successfully clued fans into the conception of modulation as something that Fish does in their best Type 2 jams, even if they don't understand the actual mechanics of it. In fan reviews of shows and in daily discussions on social media, I actually find that today more fans attempt to talk about Fish jams switching from major to minor keys or moving to new keys within a jam. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're close, sometimes they're flat out wrong. But what is clear is that fans continue to place a premium on harmonic exploration, and the Fish maps have given fans both a new vocabulary and a visual representation for these musical journeys. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That was fascinating. My roommate in first year of graduate school only listened to Fish in the car, so it was this wonderful journey right back to.
That's a very typical thing to say, is that that I hear a lot is like, oh yeah, my roommate in college listened to nothing but Fish, and oh God, I can never listen to it again or something.
That was wonderful. Did you talk to him about how the arrows and the brackets, what they meant, or did you decipher all of that?
No, I've talked with him about it, and he actually has a legend on his website that describes what everything means, but he sort of found that he's tried to explain what the maps mean musically a number of times, and people seem more interested in just sort of the visual component of it. But some people who are musicians do get very into it.
Yeah.
He told me that some people have actually commissioned original tattoos from him. So you get it.
We have some time for some questions. Bill?
Thanks for a great paper. I'm curious about his own sort of improvisation. I've seen the New York Times video where he talks about it, and I seem to recall that he says he sits down while he listens and draws, maps, which is what the early ones look like. But some of the later ones you showed are definitely really planned and constructed. And has he talked about that? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Has he talked about that, or have fans talked about, his maps?
Yeah. So he used to do them in one listen. He would just put the headphones on, write it down. He always sort of insisted that, it's just how he's hearing it at the time. He's not saying what the band does. It's just how he hears what the band does, for example. Basically, it's a... sorry, my friend just... So basically what happens here is that he is... In those original ones, he's performing, and he says it's like he's improvising. It's like a creative response to the music, and in a way I almost imagine it's like the way sci-fi fans write like fan fiction. It's sort of like his creative response to the music. But now he said he's left that behind. He's become much more interested in a sort of this very artistic aesthetic quality, and really sort of going for levels of detail and shapes and color that he couldn't get when he was just listening in one. So he stops now, he goes back and he checks, he makes lots of corrections. And he prefers it this way, but I think he likes both. I'm not sure.
Thanks. I can't believe I'm about to out myself as a one-time Fish fan.
That's all right.
Fish has this, I think, fairly famous in the community, no analysis rule amongst themselves. Like, they won't talk about what they just did when they get off stage. So I'm wondering if you've talked to him about that, or if fans talk about maybe sort of a transgression of the band's ethos or something. Like, if this is seen as maybe not okay from a certain perspective.
Sure, yeah. Well, there is very much the pushback that a lot of people have, and this, I think, many of us as music scholars are familiar with this, that when we analyze music whatever the music is, people will say, you're ruining it by, you know, or any kind of analysis of literature or art or whatever. People say, oh, you're ruining it by analyzing it. So there is that response, but that no analysis rule was really something that the band invented for themselves. And before they had invented that in like 1997 or so, they were highly analytical, self-analytical, and they would come off stage and just talk, you know, about what went right, what went wrong, and so they've said that they were sort of the most analytical band of their own music, you know, of any band. So within the fan base, there has never been a sort of dip in the desire or acceptability of talking about Phish's music and analyzing it and critiquing it. So this is just another addition to that to the voices of people just talking about this stuff online and at shows all the time. In a way, it's part of that discourse, and it sort of engages with it because talking about how much you disliked what Phish just did at last night's show is part of being a Phish head in some ways. So.
At one point, you could hear the audience responding. So does he ever care about notating that?
Yes, there are a few times in some of these where you will see the word crowd, and I'm trying to find it on some of these. These are really detailed ones. There's some crowd. Right. So that one is at the end of a jam, so it's not as salient. But he does put them in the middle of some. I've seen them in the middle of some, and they usually come at points that are sort of transitional moments between one jam segment and another, where there's a dip in dynamic, and the fans sort of realize that a self-contained musical section has ended, and so they applaud it, almost in the same way that you would applaud a jazz soloist after he finishes a solo. And then there's an even bigger cheer usually when they don't actually finish the song and they go into a new jam segment right after that, because it means, oh, they're still going, they're still experimenting, they're still pushing this further and further. So.
Time for one more?
I know that you went to the event in New York 2 weeks ago, and I wasn't there, but I've seen some pictures, and it looked like, was he doing a map in real time at that event?
Yes.
Was that recorded and online or anything like that?
It was recorded. It's supposed to be online soon.
Not yet, though.
Not yet.
Okay.
But yes, we did a book talk with the author of a 33 1/3 book, who's actually here, Walter. Sorry to out you. We did a live mapping demonstration. And what was actually one of the really interesting things about that was people were very interested in. I mean, people were just asking endless questions of him, like, how did you do that? Why did you write this? What does this mean? So people were very, I mean, to the right audience, it's sort of a very receptive kind of visualization. Yeah.
Sure. Stephen.
Hi, I'm White Holland. I have a quick question about, have you considered an analogy between the sort of stuff that Mike does and something like religious artwork that for a scholar would be understood to be carrying a kind of theological argument, but for, like I'm thinking of a Bosch painting, but for the average viewer, for the average fan, basically, it's bestiary. It's this purely emotional experience of horror. Even in my attempts to read Dante, like I couldn't do it for years because I was told that it was an argument, and when it turned out to be a dungeon delve, that was what opened it up for me. And I'm wondering if something analogical, like an analogy to that, is going on in the fan community, as far as not understanding the information payload,
Right.
but getting the aesthetic payload that Mike maybe was resistant to acknowledging doing that.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely part of it, and you definitely get that with something like this one here, where people see this one and they go, "Yes, that's how I felt about that jam." It is so propulsive and so ecstatic and so clearly, just unidirectionally sort of teleological. So I think that there is a lot of that people sort of have this very strong emotional connection that goes beyond the information the content that's trying to be conveyed.
Thank you so
Great,
much.
thank you.